Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik, as always, and this is episode number 203 of the Baseball Podcast here on Monday, July 6th. First off, happy July 4th weekend to everybody out there. Hopefully you had some fun with friends and family, stayed safe in regards to the coronavirus and social distancing, as well as fireworks and sparklers and everything else that comes along with the July 4th holiday. I know locally the township shut down the fireworks. A lot of the communities are doing the same, but there were still a lot of bangs going on late at night for about the last week or so. And on the 4th, from my back porch, I could actually see some fireworks going off. So I know there were some of you out there who were enjoying yourself, and I know some of you listening to this podcast were setting off fireworks. So hopefully you stayed safe, stayed out of trouble, everything went well, you had a great holiday, and we are back to work here on Monday, July 6th. But jumping right into it, baseball is officially back. It's officially underway. Camp is back for all Major League teams. The official reporting date has come and passed, and already we are seeing issues when it comes to COVID-19 and the coronavirus. From what we've seen from the initial testing, as more and more results are being made public here, we talked about it last episode about how the owners are saying we cannot disclose personal information. Basically, we can't tell you who tests positive unless the player gives us the okay to do so. And from the player side, wanting full transparency on who tests positive, I would believe that within their MLBPA conversations, they're basically saying, hey, if you do test positive, come out and let the people know so that we can be as safe as we can moving forward here. But again, over the weekend, everybody reported, so everyone was tested. In total, at least 31 players and 7 staff members have tested positive for COVID-19. Now, that is only a 1.2% positive return rate, but there is still a lot of unknown, again, because they can't specifically say what's going on. The names I'm about to read to you are the ones that we know have tested positive thus far. But if you look locally here in Philadelphia, the likes of Aaron Nola, Hector Neris, and Scott Kingery are all not in camp currently, which means our ace, Philadelphia's closer, and the starting second baseman or third baseman are all not initially in camp to begin with. Now, none of this has been confirmed for any of the three that they have the virus, but again, they are not in camp yet. Everybody is using context clues. We kind of understand what is happening and why players wouldn't be on site working out right now. So, no specific detail locally has been given about Nola, Neris, Kingery, any of them. It is just a wait and see when it comes to the fans' perspective, the public, the media, all of the above. We're, again, just assuming certain things. But for the confirmed positive cases that have happened thus far, for the New York Yankees, manager Aaron Boone has confirmed test results for DJ LeMahieu and reliever Luis Cessa. Both of them are at home, and LeMahieu was asymptomatic, and Cessa only has mild symptoms. There's a few Braves players who have tested positive, including Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman's wife recently put a post out on Instagram stating in part, I'm paraphrasing here, or nope, here's the post. Let me read some of it for you. Most of you know by now, Freddie tested positive for COVID-19 last night. He has body aches, headaches, chills, and high fever since Thursday. He is someone who literally never gets sick, and the virus hit him like a ton of bricks. We've been really strict for the past 4 months. Haven't gone to a grocery store, haven't gone out to dinner once, haven't seen our friends, and only allowed our family at our house, and we still got it. So far, Charlie, Carol, and I are okay. And then it continues on. We appreciate all the messages and prayers. Please keep them coming, etc. But basically saying that no matter how careful you can be out there, you could still be susceptible to this virus. You heard it there from the Freeman family. They haven't been hanging out with friends, have been doing curbside, haven't been going to the grocery store, and still somebody in their family somewhere was asymptomatic and shared it with Freddie, and now he will not be reporting on time for Major League Camp 2.0. I believe we're calling it Summer Camp instead of Spring Training 2.0. A lot of fans are enjoying that verbiage better. But along with Freddie Freeman, you got reliever Will Smith, right-hander Toki Tuasant, and infielder Pete Kozma, all for the Atlanta Braves, all testing positive. And again, we talked about it for the Phillies. Ace starter, second baseman, closer. Now you look at Atlanta, all-star first baseman, all-star reliever, other individuals on the team. So 2 teams in the NL East are clearly being affected, and we're not even a week into the new 2020 season. There have been some other teams that have come out and confirmed tests as well. The Minnesota Twins, third baseman Miguel Sano has tested positive. Catcher Williams Astudillo, shortstop Nick Gordon, and right-handed reliever Edwin Collin have all tested positive, according to CBS Sports, for the Minnesota Twins. And again, Miguel Sano, a big-time addition offensively, not an addition, but hopefully they think he can continue to develop and work his way into playing like in addition to that team offensively outside of just hitting home runs. Shortstop Nick Gordon, a pretty good prospect up and coming there. People thought he was going to contribute now early on. Who knows what you're going to be getting from Nick Gordon. Kansas City Royals catcher Salvador Perez confirmed that he tested positive for the virus. He said he was asymptomatic and felt like he could play baseball today if that were the case. And that, without getting, again, back into this virus, just reading the difference between Freddie Freeman and Salvador Perez, and they have the same virus or the same quote-unquote sickness, is just the most fascinating part about this virus and about what's happening. And doctors and nobody knows as of right now, and if they do, please fill me in, listeners. Please go to social media, into the comments on the podcast feed, wherever you're getting this, but let me know if this isn't the case, because I would love to be wrong. But doctors don't know why certain individuals experience symptoms and others do not. They don't understand why this could be death almost, a very, very serious illness for some, even if you don't have pre-existing conditions. Yes, we know those with pre-existing conditions are most at risk, but you have a very healthy Freddie Freeman and a very healthy Salvador Perez. One is obviously very sick, under the weather, chills, fever, headache, soreness. The other one feels like he could play a baseball game today or tomorrow. And that's just a fascinating aspect of this virus, which obviously makes it so hard to contain. And it's a reason why they're testing in Major League Baseball, because they caught Salvador Perez's positive test, if that's the right lingo to use. Caught. I don't know what else you could use, but if they catch the virus but before it gets into the locker room, even if you are asymptomatic, that's a huge win when it comes to the player side of things. Boston Red Sox manager Rob Roenick confirmed to ESPN left-handers Josh Taylor and Darwin Hernandez. Sorry, Darwin, I botched that first name. I apologize. Those two have been isolated from their teammates. Additional tests: St. Louis Cardinals left-handers Ricardo Sanchez and Genesis Cabrera have tested positive. Let's see here. Cleveland Indians outfielder Delano DeShields, San Diego Padres outfielder Tommy Pham have all tested positive. So we're up now to 6, 7 different teams, and the Phillies aren't even on this list, to make it possibly 8 different teams that within a week are seeing the effects of this virus. It also states here that 4 players for the Miami Marlins have tested positive, but their identities have not been disclosed publicly, such as the likes of the Phillies. They just put them on the COVID injured list, and use at your discretion what you would like to report, because if you are on this list, it does not directly mean that you are positive for COVID. This, once again, becomes healthcare reasons, law-abiding reasons, but you could certainly try to use your context clues there and make your assumptions. But with all of these names being read, all of this continuing to evolve here for Major League Baseball, we're continuing to see some players opt out. We discussed the 4 that we have known in the past. Ryan Zimmerman, Joe Ross, Mike Leake have opted out. Ian Desmond as well was a name. Well, a few other individuals join them on that list. One is semi-notable just based on name and past accomplishments. The other one is very notable for the 2020 season and the biggest name to date. That first individual is Felix Hernandez for the Atlanta Braves. He was in Atlanta on a minor league deal, looking to potentially be used in the 5th rotation spot. With the expanded roster, I would have assumed he would have made the team down there and would have helped them in long relief situations or a spot start based on injury. But King Felix decided that he will not be out there this summer in 2020. And then the biggest name thus far who has opted out is David Price of the Los Angeles Dodgers. I was surprised by this, but David Price wrote in an Instagram post, quote, "Dodgers, I have decided it is in the best interest of my health and my family's health for me not to play this season. I will miss my teammates and will be cheering for them throughout the season and on to a World Series victory. I'm sorry I won't be playing for you this year, but look forward to representing you next year. Stay safe, be well, and be kind. And go Dodgers. Love, David Price." So the Dodgers, oh man, this is a blow for them. Yes, David Price was almost a fill-in, it feels like, sometimes in the Mookie Betts deal. But David Price can be an electric pitcher when he is locked in. Obviously, he has postseason experience all the way back to his Tampa Bay Devil Ray days against the Phillies over a decade ago. But David opts out from the left side. Now the Dodgers have potential questions in the rotation. Yes, they have a lot of young arm talent that should fill in and perform just fine. But again, if you look on paper, you lose Maeda, you lose Price that you thought you were going to fill in for. The other guy, I forget his name off the top of my head, Ryu. That's it, Ryu. They lost him. So there's change at the top end of that Dodgers rotation that's going to be interesting to see here. But the biggest fish that could fall, and the biggest one of them all, is Mike Trout. And this is a question because Mike's wife is currently expecting their first child, and he or she, I'm not sure off the top of my head here, but is due in August. And Mike, if best case scenario plays out, will be playing baseball this summer, head back for the birth of his child on paternity leave, whether it's a day or 2, 3, 4, whatever that may be, and then head back to his teammates out west and continue playing. Or if the wife is out west and they decide to give birth out there, now that they know they will be in L.A., not in New Jersey, potentially he stays local and makes things a little bit easier. But he has discussed at length how coronavirus and COVID-19 could affect his decision. Potentially, maybe the Angels are out of it. They're 5, 10, 15 games out. You're in August. You have 30 games left. You're 10 games out. And his wife gives birth at the end of August. Potentially, you don't see him come back in the month of September. Or if it's in the middle of August and they're 10 games out, you don't see him come back if something like that happens. Or they get hot, they're up 5 or 10 games, and he wants to return as soon as possible because he's trying to play in the playoffs for the second time in his career and actually win a game for the first time after being swept initially in his first appearance. So Mike is currently on site. He's currently working out, but a lot of individual players are taking a wait-and-see approach. They want to continue to see the numbers be released as positive tests are revealed. They want to continue to see how widespread the outbreak is within the Major League Baseball world, and will certainly make educated decisions based on the ever-evolving conditions that they will be asked to perform in this summer. It's going to be fascinating to see. But big picture, will there be a 2020 baseball season? Yes, even with the spike happening nationwide. The low percentage rate we talked about, 2, 3, 4%, is a positive thing when it comes to baseball. I know there's cities out there in the teens, even in the 20s when it comes to positive percent rate, and that's when things really become eye-opening and need to shut down and really observe. But when you're at 2, 3, 4, 5%, I think baseball believes that it can continue forward and adhere to the protocols that they're putting in with the health and safety individuals that they're working with and still be able to perform a successful 2020 season. But we've seen now, only a week in, the likes of Freddie Freeman, Aaron Nola, Salvador Perez, multiple All-Stars already being affected by this coronavirus. Now, is it a quick spin zone here at the end of segment 1? Is it a good thing that these individuals got coronavirus now? That sounds bad. You never want an individual to get the disease, of course, but you're understanding that there is risk involved, and if they are going to get it from a fan's perspective, maybe now before the year starts compared to a September push could be a positive thing. But just hearing me say that, it doesn't feel right. I know, again, it's kind of like an injury in football where you're going, oh, he's out 6 weeks, but I'm glad it's weeks 2 through 8. And not weeks 15 through the playoffs is kind of the point I'm trying to make here as we wrap up segment 1. But we see this virus, it's going to do its work. It's going to affect these ball players no matter how careful they are. And then once you start traveling, getting other individuals involved, other locations, a lot of the logistics, it'll be fascinating to kind of wait and see. Ultimately, hopefully they can continue to keep it to 1 or 2 individuals in isolated situations and avoid a total team or clubhouse outbreak, which I believe they will be able to. I'm staying positive here just after July 4th. I think we're going to have Major League Baseball. I keep watching the KBO on TV, and they have figured it out. So hopefully baseball can as well out there. But that'll wrap it up here for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We're going to pause right now for a word from one of our sister shows and one of our sponsors. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the Cleveland Indians. They're talking about changing their nickname. Well, I'm going to give you guys a few different options, and you have to let me know which one you like best. But stick around, everybody. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back, and thanks for listening to today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am Kevin Mahalik, and this is episode number 203 of the Baseball Podcast. Today is Monday, July 6th. And before we get into the second segment here, I'll take some time to ask you guys to check us out on social media. Check out the GSMC Baseball Podcast on Facebook, as well as Twitter, Instagram, across the board, posting articles on Facebook, as well as tweeting out the latest on what's going on in the baseball world. And for the past couple of weeks and months, it's been crazy trying to follow along with these negotiations. Now we're going to get into actual baseball, trying to keep everybody posted on what's going on night in and night out there, the big stories, everything that's going on with the coronavirus, like we discussed in segment number 1. If you want to stay up to date with all the latest intel, check out the Baseball Podcast. As well as, do me a favor, check out the rest of the podcast network. I know you're into baseball because you're listening to this podcast, obviously, but if you're into football, soccer, basketball, if you're into more than sports, which I know a lot of you are out there, whether it's cooking, beauty tips, news, cars, music, movies, that the GSMC Podcast Network has a podcast for you in those genres. And over 17 million downloads in the month of June or May, I believe it was. I'm not sure if the June numbers have been released yet, but we very much appreciate everything you guys, the listeners, are doing for us out there. And wherever you're listening to this podcast, if it's on iTunes, check us out, leave a 5-star rating, write a review, please. That goes a long way with helping us within the Apple world continue to be pushed to the top of the list when people search for baseball podcasts or search GSMC. It allows higher visibility for myself and the baseball podcast if you share and you click 5 stars and you write a review. So no new reviews to report this week. On last episode, we had a review from Cracker Jack 20. Nothing new to report here as of Monday over the weekend, but I'll allow it this time from you guys just because it was a holiday weekend. So I'll challenge you to write a review before Thursday's episode. If you write it, I'll read it here on the show. You know I appreciate you guys and everything you're doing for the podcast out there. But jumping into the second segment here, talking about the Cleveland Indians. There's been a lot of discussion here recently, actual viable discussion about finally changing the nickname, finally getting rid of Indians as the nickname for Cleveland's baseball team. This has been a long time coming. I know a few years ago they started to phase out the Chief Wahoo logo, as well as merchandise, apparel, anywhere around the stadium. They completely took Chief Wahoo out of the Indians logo, but maintained the Indian side of things. And Cleveland has been called the Indians since 1915. So it's been 105 years going on. There's been a lot that's happened since 1915. So this isn't something that you just come out one day and say, hey, we are going to change this. There's a lot of history involved. A lot of tales, a lot of tangles that could be involved with changing your name. But with everything going on in society, first the coronavirus bringing us all together as almost a human species, regardless of race, sex, gender, whatever it is, this virus attacked us all, so we felt as one, thus leading into the Black Lives Matter movement that is continuing still today. There is still protests going on around the corner from my house. Individuals out there almost nightly, horns are honking for the cars to show their support, and it's very peaceful, very positive. Shout out to those individuals out there. But now that has led us to come back to this conversation about the Cleveland Indians, and not only the Indians, but the Washington Redskins are getting pressure as well. I know this is a baseball podcast, but if you're into baseball, you typically understand or enjoy all sports. So the Redskins and Indians are both getting a ton of pressure here to make an adjustment to their nicknames. So I decided to put together a list here of about 5 or 6 different nicknames that I think Cleveland could change to moving forward here. Some of them serious, some of them not so much, a little bit more comical in nature, but definitely all of them have a connection to the city of Cleveland. And I've seen quite a few lists out there. There's a lot of local papers putting out potential lists and polls for public opinion out there, and that's always a slippery slope, especially if you put a write-in option, which fortunately they did not, but things have been called very interesting things when it comes to write-in elections in the public poll. So back to the Cleveland Indians and their potential nicknames. First one here, and a lot of the locals don't like it, based on my Twitter research and based on diving into it a little bit, but the Spiders, the Cleveland Spiders. First of all, when I hear Spiders, the only one I think of is Richmond, the University of Richmond, Division I AA football program down there in Richmond. It's just, that's the only team I can think of. So Spiders may be an underused nickname when it comes to potential logos, potential designs in 2020. I feel like you could work with the Spiders very much so in regards to graphic design. But the Spiders in Cleveland, the connection there was in the late 1800s, there was actually a National League team called the Cleveland Spiders. So there's already been a baseball team in Cleveland nicknamed the Spiders. I don't know why the locals and some of the diehards don't like it. Yes, you're attached to the Indians, and you don't want to kind of go back to what you were before the Indians. But also the Spiders, I'm just saying, I think you could do worse out there in Cleveland. So be careful what you wish for when you say, hey, I don't want to be the Spiders. Well, you could end up with something worse. I mean, this next one is extremely obvious, and it almost is worse, in my opinion. But the Cleveland Rockers, or the Cleveland Blues, or the Cleveland Guitars, I've seen all of them kind of lumped in together into one category for the obvious reason that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is located in Cleveland. And the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is really kind of what Cleveland's known for. If you were to ask somebody, hey, first thing that comes to mind when you say Cleveland, it's either the Browns or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that's just speaking from personal opinion. Maybe it's not the Browns, but the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame would certainly be one of the first thing that comes to mind. So how do we correlate the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame into the baseball team? I've seen the Cleveland Rocks. That just makes me think of the Drew Carey show. Cleveland Rocks. Cleveland Rocks. And I guess Drew Carey, he's a big Cleveland guy, big baseball guy, so potentially there, that connection is nothing to kind of be ashamed of. But every time I hear Cleveland Rocks or playing Friday night, the Cleveland Rocks versus the Minnesota Twins, I'm just going to go right back to the 1990s and the Drew Carey show. And I don't think that's something I want to do on a daily basis every summer, year after year after year. So you got to at least go Rockers, or the Blues isn't bad. Of course, you have the St. Louis Blues, the hockey team not too far away. But the Cleveland Blues, from a baseball perspective, I've seen the Cleveland Blue Sox being thrown out there. I wasn't a fan of that one. People were saying, hey, the White Sox are taken, the Red Sox are taken. What else can we go? You're not going to go Black Sox, Blue Sox. Let's just name all the primary colors and name the Sox after them. So the Cleveland Blues, rock and roll, rhythm and blues, R&B, it could all potentially come together. But I would take the Spiders over the Rockers, which I think is the best out of those three that I talked about and lumped together there. The next one here, I'm probably going to mispronounce it at least one point. I looked up how to say it here, but the Cleveland Cuyahogas. I actually nailed it that time. Let's go. The Cuyahogas, which is the river that flows through Cleveland, as well as the county that the city of Cleveland is located in. So Cuyahoga County and Cuyahoga River obviously play a big part in the city of Cleveland, its infrastructure, and its economy. So if you go with the Cleveland Cuyahogas or the Cleveland Kais, potentially, I don't know, the Kai Guys. There you go. The Philadelphia Flyers, we call them the Fly Guys, so you go with the Kai Guys, the Cuyahogas. That one's kind of growing on me here. I don't know. It'd be interesting. A lot of people would struggle to say that, so maybe it would have to be the Kais instead of the Cuyahogas. Think Knicks as opposed to Knickerbockers, New York Knickerbockers. Well, you got the Cleveland Kais instead of the Cleveland Cuyahogas. So that one I'll put up number 2. I like that one a little bit better than the Rockers. I think the Spiders make the most sense, but if you're going outlandish, the Kais. I'm saying that one's pretty good. But next up, everybody's throwing it out there. A lot of the locals as well. The Cleveland Buckeyes. This one, I don't understand, okay? Because I'm a big football fan. I'm a big college football fan. And the Ohio State Buckeyes pretty much own that nickname. Now, I understand you have the LSU Tigers and the Clemson Tigers, and two big-time programs or big-time organizations can have the same nickname. It's just a color scheme with the scarlet and gray in Columbus, or red and silver, whatever the heck it is there for the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm a little bit of a Michigan fan, so that's why I say that in jest. So you Ohio State fans don't hate me out there, or do, whatever. Either way, get in the comments. It's fine. But that's football. We're talking baseball. The Cleveland Buckeyes, the reason this plays too is it was the Negro League. It was the team in Cleveland for the Negro League from 42 to 50. So the Cleveland Buckeyes have been a thing in the city before, and could be again. A lot of people would enjoy that more than the Spiders. I just think being so close to Columbus, the Ohio State Buckeyes, the Cleveland Buckeyes, both being in the same state, I don't know if we want to overdo it there on the Buckeyes nickname. The next couple I threw in here, the first couple I've seen out there on social media, a little bit more prevalent. These last few are my own individual ones that I'm looking to add here to the list. The first one would be the Battlehawks. I just like the XFL. These next two are from the XFL. I was watching it. I enjoyed the nickname. I don't really like the Roughnecks or the Defenders or the Renegades when it comes to Cleveland in baseball. I really wasn't vibing when it comes to those nicknames. But the Cleveland Battlehawks, I kind of liked. And I liked it for the St. Louis Battlehawks as well. I think that's an underrated nickname. It could potentially get some buzz in Cleveland there. Let's go. The Cleveland Battlehawks versus the Minnesota Twins. So yeah, see, that one's got a little bit of a buzz to it. So I like that one above Buckeyes, but Buckeyes would certainly win in a popular poll. Next up, you got the Vipers. I like the Florida team from the XFL, the Vipers. I thought that was good use of a nickname. Not a lot of Vipers out there. Maybe it's a little bit too far off when it comes to a professional team. They tend not to go the animal route or the Griffins. They don't go that way when it comes to professionals and kind of the make-believe style of things. But you go Vipers, kind of take it a snake. I thought about the Dragons, the Seattle Dragons from the XFL, but I don't like the Cleveland Dragons, the Cleveland Vipers. I like the Cleveland Battlehawks. I like the Cleveland Kais or the Cuyahogas, and then I like the Cleveland Spiders, potentially being the top options there in Cleveland. So it'll be interesting to see if these conversations ultimately go anywhere. This is the first time that ownership has really been open and honest and stated, yes, we are going to have these discussions. Yes, this is something we're looking into potentially doing here. Once again, this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. There was a ton of financial responsibility tied to discussions and decisions like this. You have to re-merchandise everything. You have to remarket everything. And you basically have to test if it's going to go well. Because if you go from the Indians to something like the Vipers that nobody likes, you could potentially lose some of those common fans who just enjoyed the nostalgia of the Indians and the team it's been since 1915. So it's interesting as well because the Atlanta Braves haven't had any discussion. They've come out and basically said, hey, they are not considering a name change at this time. Yes, we understand everything that's going on, paraphrasing for the Braves here. But at this time, there are bigger problems, bigger issues. We're not looking at the name change right now. As well as I wrote down here, the Florida State Seminoles. They've seen some pressure in the past, but it hasn't come back around yet. I haven't heard it become an issue as we're discussing NCAA football returning this fall. The two of them that really are being pushed are the Cleveland Indians and the Washington Redskins in the National Football League. So you guys listening out there, let me know in the comments. You guys got to let me know which one you like the best. Hit 5-star rating, write a review, say, dude, I love the Cleveland Cuyahogas. I think that's a great nickname. Or I hate you and I hate Michigan, so the Cleveland Buckeyes is the way we're rolling. I'm fine with either one. I'll read them here on the show. We can have some fun and interact, as well as on social media. If you want to DM me, direct message me on there. Let's chat. Let's have some fun. Let's go back and forth, and let's see what nickname ultimately we think Cleveland should use moving forward. But that'll wrap it up here for the second segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll pause now for a word from one of our sister shows and one of our sponsors. But when we come back, we're going to talk about fantasy baseball and the impact that 60 games is having, talk about some prospects who could make a difference now, not only on the field, but as well in fantasy baseball. They could impact fantasy maybe more than they could impact on the field. So that'll be a fun discussion here when we get back. But for now, I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We're going to pause. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back, and thanks for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. This is episode number 203 of the Baseball Podcast here on Monday, July 6th. Shout out to everybody out there who enjoyed their July 4th weekend. America's birthday out there. Hopefully you enjoyed the beach if you were able to get out there. Social distancing as well. Hamburgers, hot dogs on the grill. I myself enjoyed a nice round of golf. On Friday, I was able to get off of work Friday, play a nice round of golf. It was a beautiful day out there, sprayed it around the course. Yeah, some were good, some were bad. You know how it is for us amateur golfers out there. You make a couple of putts, you hit a couple of nice drives, and things don't always work out for you, even if you do hit a nice drive. So frustrating as well, but enjoyed the beautiful weather, enjoyed some friends, some family. Hopefully you guys did the same as you stay safe as we continue through the month of July, and we continue to trudge towards Major League Baseball, towards actual baseball, actual games, injuries, storylines to discuss, and not just talking about the coronavirus, as well as fantasy baseball, which we're going to talk about here in the third segment of today's episode. So, the impact on fantasy baseball when it comes to a 60-game season instead of 162 games. A lot of it comes down to the commissioner of your league. And if you're playing fantasy baseball, what I'm about to tell you is not going to be new to you guys out there. I'm just kind of filling in everybody else on what's going on around the world of fantasy baseball. And if you haven't decided yet on your league, here are a few things you definitely want to think about as you're spelling out the rules and regulations for the 2020 season. So you should change your innings limit right off the bat. In some leagues, there's innings limits in regards to being called up, or the amount of innings pitched and the amount of innings on the roster, and a lot of details that leads to a boring podcast. But you guys who play fantasy baseball out there, you know what I'm talking about. Innings limits, certainly going to have to make changes to a lot of those moving forward. You're going to have to increase injured list spots by 2, 3, 4, 5, who knows? Again, we talked about it a lot in the first segment. Nobody really knows exactly what's going to be taking place here, so you're going to have to expand the injured list, of course. You have to decide however many weeks is official when it comes to the standings and crowning a winner. This is something you may not have thought about here. As I was going through the list, I'm going, oh, this is something they should definitely do. But think about it, right? 9-inning baseball game, you get to 5.5. We're at official. And this summer, with the 2020 season, we don't know if we're going to be finishing. So basically, hey, 4 weeks and it's official, 5 weeks, 6 weeks out of the 8, whatever it may be, your commissioner definitely needs to decide, hey, who's ever in first place, and we get to this month, the middle of August, and the MLB shuts down, we're saying it counts, and we're giving the trophy to this individual. When it comes to dynasty leagues, which means you keep players year over year over year and you don't redraft your entire year every year, a lot of dynasty leagues get into minor league players and stashing them for years to come. There's a lot of conversation around the minor leagues not being played, and how does that affect fantasy baseball? Well, the easiest outcome is to just essentially turn off the year of eligibility on the roster for all minor league individuals if they're not playing ball this summer because they're in high A or double A and not quite on the level high enough to get on the taxi squad. Just say, hey, this year doesn't count against the 3 years of control that you have for this individual in this dynasty league. And then last, you're going to have to allow daily transactions as opposed to weekly transactions. Everybody knows when it comes to fantasy football, hey, who are we getting on the waiver wire come Tuesday or Wednesday? Well, that's going to have to be daily when it comes to baseball, just with the amount of positive tests, the amount of injuries that could take place because of the short ramp-up time, only being 60 games. There's definitely going to be a lot of fluctuation in the roster this year. A lot of people to the IL, a lot of additions, a lot of call-ups. So daily transactions certainly need to be allowed in the world of fantasy baseball. But I also wanted to discuss with you guys a list of some individuals who I think really could contribute when it comes to fantasy baseball this summer. The names of prospects that most likely wouldn't have put up as large of numbers or wouldn't have played in the amount of games, 55 out of 60, 90% compared to 145 out of 162, whatever that quick math is there. Somebody let me know how close I got there when it comes to an overlapping percentage. But I wanted to run through and name the top 12. We discussed in episodes past prospects who were on taxi squads who could make an impact. Well, these are regards to fantasy baseball and who I would rank kind of 1 through 10 on an impact level of prospect. And number 1 on the list, and somebody who should be on everybody's roster or everybody's radar at the very least if you were waiting to draft until they figured out what they were going to do with Major League Baseball, but Nate Pearson, starting pitcher from the Blue Jays. Last year in the minors, 5-4, a 2.30 ERA, 119 strikeouts, only 27 walks. He's most likely going to be the 5th starter in Toronto. There's no need to kind of manage his innings this year. That's what they were looking at from the jump. He was probably going to get called up after a couple of months, but now you can throw him in there right away. If you didn't watch the video of spring training, he was absolutely mowing down big league hitters. He was the story of the spring when it came to the pitching prospect side of things, really turning heads with his fastball slider combination, and somebody who only needs to get through the opposing team's lineup maybe 2 times. You're looking at 4 or 5 innings of full bore from Pearson. Man, that could be fun to watch in Toronto, and they could find themselves enjoying his starts more than some other guys' starts when it comes to the months of August and September moving forward. But if he was the pitching prospect of the spring, this guy, number 2, Dylan Carlson, was the hitting prospect of the spring. Last year, he hit .292 with 26 home runs and 20 stolen bases for the St. Louis Cardinals. And now, with the addition of the designated hitter in the National League, that should open up more at-bats for Carlson, but the outfield is a little bit crowded there because Matt Carpenter figures to get most of his starts at DH, which puts the opening in the infield rather than the outfield, which then means Carlson will be battling with Tyler O'Neill ultimately for that everyday left field spot. They may run O'Neill out there for the first week or two, but ultimately I think Carlson will end up replacing him, and after just a few weeks start to light things up offensively. And he's going to be somebody that if he falls in your draft, you could jump on, because after weeks 1 or 2, you'll start to see him put up stats and start to help you win ball games. But number 3, Nick Madrigal, the second baseman for the White Sox. We talked about him in episodes past. He hit .311, 35 steals last year in the minors. He's more of a contact hitter, stolen base guy, speed guy. That's where I think he will see a lot of time when it comes to the big leagues and the White Sox. It also depends on how they start out of the books. If they really, start to play good baseball, maybe they don't look to enter him into the lineup as early. But if you find yourselves around 500 as a White Sox fan after a week or two, you're going to be saying, hey, let's get the kids in there. Let's get some run here in 60 games. We know things aren't going to be like normal. Let's get them exposure. Those normal August, September games where they would have been called up 50, 60 games. Well, that's right now. That's week 2. So let's see what Madrigal has out here. But Nico Horner, shortstop for the Chicago Cubs, 2019 split time between the minors and the majors, hit .292 in the minors, hit .282 in the majors. He seems to be more of a doubles guy with only 6 total home runs combined between the two, 9 stolen bases, so really a gap-to-gap power offensive guy, maybe a little bit of a pop. Let's see, he's mostly a contact guy, like I just said. Could be a fill-in for Javier Baez. Let's see, the Cubs don't have an answer at second base, So potentially they move Horner over to second base early on. We talked about the over-under for the Cubbies being the NL Central leader. According to Las Vegas, I was surprised by this. I think they are more in the middle of the pack when it comes to the NL Central, behind the likes of the Cubs. But if they get contributions from Horner offensively, things really could shift and change quickly for the Cubbies. Another White Sox here, Michael Kopech, starting pitcher. He was up and down in the minors and majors in 2018. He missed all of 2019. He was 1-1 with a 5.02 ERA in 2018 in the major leagues. So he just throws absolute gas. Coming off of Tommy John surgery, people know the Kopech name. It's just a matter of time until he makes it to the show. And with a shortened season, once again, innings limits go out of the picture. The reserve of holding them back is really eased up due to the 60 games. So he's another individual we could see be thrown out there early on in the season and potentially be effective. Brendan Rodgers, second baseman for the Rockies. He hit .350 in the minor leagues last year with 9 home runs. He did get some time in the show, did not perform as well. He hit .224 in 76 at-bats, but the DH once again for the National League, and Ian Desmond sitting out 2020 plans. That really opens up a spot for Brandon Rodgers. Daniel Murphy potentially could be the new designated hitter, leaving Ryan McMahon at first base, which leaves second base for Brendan Rodgers. So now it looks like he's going to get a lot of playing time there based on the domino effect from Ian Desmond not being in the lineup. It moves this guy here, this guy here, this guy here. And all of a sudden, Brendan Rodgers is looking at a ton of at-bats this summer that there's no shot he would have gotten before. Mackenzie Gore, a starting pitcher for the Padres. We talked about him as a huge prospect coming up. He's now going to get a ton of usage. The likes of Chris Paddock out there, as well as Joey Luszewski, Zach Davies. It's just going to be fun to watch. Locally here in Philadelphia, Spencer Howard, from a fantasy perspective, he is going to be a big, big part of this Phillies team this summer. He's going to get a ton of starts. I think they will hold him down for the 1 week in order to maintain, his rights for an additional year, that old service time exploration that everybody loves, the exploitation of the service time there. But look for Spencer Howard to be up after a 3-1 record last year and a 2.03 ERA across the minor leagues. For the Atlanta Braves, you got Kyle Wright, who was up in the majors last year. He went 0-3 with an 8.69 ERA, but it looks like he's recovered. He had a solid spring training, 2.03 ERA. He had a 4.17 ERA in the minors last year. So he could be a guy who just got called up, got kicked around. Hey, this is what you need to work on. Go back down, figure it out, and then boom, you're right back in it. He was the former 5th overall pick. Scouts are still generally high on his stuff. So look for him to make an addition this year for the Braves, potentially as well, with injuries or COVID affecting Atlanta. So Bobby Dalbec, a third baseman for the Red Sox, he hit .239 last year in the minors with 27 homers. So power remains Dalbec's calling card. He continues to struggle to put the bat on the ball a little bit. He did cut down his strikeout rate last year. He's showing signs of a little bit more bat control as he's getting older in his career. But let's see. He could have an option or potential at third base or first base, and he could find himself in the lineup there helping out the Boston Red Sox. The last couple guys here, you got Ryan Mountcastle, first baseman for the Orioles. He hit .312 with 25 home runs in the minors last year. He was named MVP of the International League, which basically is AAA MVP, so it seems like he's an obvious candidate to have success at the big league level. They still, I don't know, it's Baltimore, and we'll have to wait and see there when it comes to how much he can contribute offensively. But those numbers and MVP status certainly make him somebody to look at late in drafts. And then wrapping up the names here at number 12, another Philly. The Phillies going with the young guys after about a week or two, in my opinion. But Alec Baum, who hit .305 with 21 home runs and 30 doubles over multiple levels last year in the minor leagues, 3 different levels. He developed his power stroke along with his contact swing. Early on, his power lacked at the next level, but as he got more comfortable, he continues to find himself. The power numbers came around. I don't know if they're going to rush him to the bigs this year, just with Gene Segura over there at third base, Kingery at second. But if Scott Kingery's out for an extended period of time, Segura goes to short, Didi to second, or Segura to second. Then you get Alec Baum at third base. So a lot could happen here when it comes to this coronavirus and the effects that it has on Major League Baseball, because that's two already. We talked about the Rockies. This domino, A, B, C, D, boom, here's a prospect for you. Well, here in Philadelphia, if the year was going on right now, Kingery's out, this guy's here, moves there. All of a sudden, Alec Baum is playing third base for the Philadelphia Phillies. So keep an eye out on those kids, 1 through 12. Honestly, every single one of them is going to get playing time this year. I don't know if every one of them is going to contribute extremely well, but those are my picks as the top guys to really look at as we get into this summer. So hopefully you've had your fantasy drafts out there. You've come back around. You guys have decided everything that you're going to adjust for this summer, and you can find yourself still enjoying fantasy baseball, even though it will only be 60 games. But that'll wrap it up for the third segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik, as always. We're going to pause right now for a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows. But when we come back in the fourth and final segment, we're going to dive into the simulations. We haven't checked in on these in a couple of weeks here, and I want to see how we're doing, both team-wise and individual-wise. So I'm curious to see what we got going on. So stick around, everybody. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Hello and welcome back to the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. This is episode number 203 of the Baseball Podcast. I appreciate everybody listening in today. Here in the fourth and final segment, we're going to be talking about the simulations today. We haven't touched on this in a couple of weeks. This is something, if you're new to the program, I was talking about almost every episode a few months ago when there wasn't a lot to discuss across the Major League Baseball landscape. Now that a lot of recent information has come out, there is going to be baseball. These are the people testing positive. The simulations have kind of fallen into the background here a little bit, but I do like to circle back, touch in every couple of weeks and just see where the computers ultimately think the summer would have ended up. And I am very curious to see where the summer in real life finishes in 60 games compared to where the computers thought they would be over the course of 162. So baseballreference.com as well as stratomatic.com is who I'm referencing in regards to the simulations here, starting out with Baseball Reference in the American League. The New York Yankees 12 games up in the American League East on the Tampa Bay Rays. And Tampa Bay actually under 500 in the Baseball Reference simulation. So that would certainly be a disappointment. Boston at 39-51 would be a disappointment, but I think kind of realistic. Toronto and Baltimore down at the bottom, that'd be just fine. So Tampa Bay would certainly be below expectations at 45-47. In the American League Central, the Cleveland Indians are 9 games up on the Minnesota Twins. And what's even more impressive is the 59-32 record. I don't know if Cleveland's that good. I know Cleveland's good, and I'm coming around on them winning the Central potentially. But, man, that's just super impressive. The White Sox at 43-48. They're now under 500 as my potential surprise team. And the Royals and Tigers buried in the basement of this division. In the American League West, the Oakland Athletics are actually now in the lead. Seattle continues to play good baseball at 52-39. The LA Angels, 51-39, having a great summer for Baseball Reference. And then Houston, 7 games out at 47-42. Wow, an impressive American League West. So you would have the New York Yankees, the Cleveland Indians, and the Oakland Athletics winning the divisions, with the NL or the AL wild card both coming out of the West, with the Mariners and Angels being a game better than the Twins for playoff positioning. That would be a fascinating American League wild card game between the Mariners and Angels. That's something that you could probably win some money on if you bet that happening today. Just betting the Mariners to make the playoffs could have a lot of money. To have them play the Angels, man, now you're talking. So, looking at Stratomatic now, we got the Tampa Bay Rays 8 games up on the New York Yankees, and the Yankees only a game or two above 500. So the Yankees here in Stratomatic would be the disappointment of the summer thus far. Boston, Toronto, Baltimore follow in the same order here as well. Boston much closer to 500. That's where the experts think they are when it comes to this summer, so I agree with that. In the NL Central, the Cleveland Indians 55-36, so very good here in this simulation as well. Minnesota over 500 in second place. The Chicago White Sox 9 games under. They've fallen off when it comes to Stratomatic. And then the American League West still high on the Houston Astros, 60-29. That's the best record we've seen to this point in the American League across both simulations. But the Oakland A's, 21 games over 500 and 5 games behind them. So in the American League, that means your winners are Tampa Bay, Cleveland, and Houston, with the wild card game currently of Oakland and Minnesota. The New York Yankees and Kansas City Royals would be half a game out on the American League side of things. So Stratomatic's going a little bit more by the book. Baseball Reference a little bit outside the box with the Mariners and the Angels on that side. Going to the National League, looking at the NL East, Baseball Reference has the Nationals at the top. The Atlanta Braves a game and a half back. The Phillies 4 games over 500 and 6.5 back. And the Mets and Marlins rounding out that division. The Phillies would be happy at that point, 6.5 out, still in wild card contention, having conversation for sure. The NL Central, the St. Louis Cardinals, they seem to be the ones that are going to win this division when it comes to Baseball Reference. The Brewers, 5 games over 500, doing well. I don't know if they're going to be that good. And then the Pirates, Reds, and Cubbies all down the bottom. The Cubs at the bottom of the division here at 37-54. Just fascinating to see how some people think they could win, and their over-under was leading the division according to Vegas, and this simulation has them 17 games under. The NL West Baseball Reference has the LA Dodgers 18 games up on the Rockies, but the Rockies 11 games over 500. Wow, okay. Colorado still doing well. So you'd have Washington, St. Louis, and LA winning the division. And the wild card game would be the Atlanta Braves and the Colorado Rockies in the National League. So the Rockies would be the surprise if that were to be the outcome in that side. Going to Stratomatic, Washington winning the NL East as well on this side of things. They like the rotation when it comes to the supercomputers. Atlanta, second, 5.5 back. The Phillies at exactly 500. That's right about where I have them. The Mets and Marlins rounding out the East. The NL Central, Milwaukee, 2 games up on St. Louis, 2 games up on the Cubs, and 3 games up on the Cincinnati Reds. So anybody's ball game there in the NL Central, according to Stratomatic. And then if you look at the NL West, the Dodgers, but the San Diego Padres at 51-39. Not the Colorado Rockies are the surprise in the NL West. So if you look at the National League, Washington, Milwaukee, and LA. In the National League wild card currently, San Diego and Atlanta, with St. Louis, Chicago, Cincinnati, and Philadelphia all within striking distance. And that seems to be about right. Again, in the Central, Milwaukee, St. Louis, LA out west, Washington, Atlanta in the East. You can find a lot of commonalities between these smart computers and a lot of the so-called experts out there when it comes to what they're potentially thinking this year. And it's unfortunate, kind of looking at the over-unders too. It's really Cleveland, Minnesota, New York, Houston, Oakland out west, and then or in the American League, not out west, Oakland's out west, which is why I said that. In the National League, again, you have the Braves, the Nationals, and the Dodgers, really the 3 that are the cut above that next tier of the likes of the Phillies, the Mets, the Cubs, everybody in the NL Central. So it'll be fascinating to see how 60 games affects that compared to 162. But looking at individual performances offensively, Baseball Reference WAR position leaders Juan Soto, followed by Cody Bellinger and Mike Trout as your top three. Nolan Arenado and Francisco Lindor round out the top five of everybody who's over 5.0 in the WAR standings. Looking at batting averages, wow, this would be very impressive. Michael Brantley batting .384 as of July 4th weekend here. That would certainly be getting conversations around, can he hit 400? Can he get hot? How long is he going to be above 375? Will he keep it up in the month of June? Because the next highest, 343, 340, those guys would be talked about as having excellent years. That's Juan Soto and Adam Frazier in Pittsburgh. But Brantley, you'd be having historical conversations at 384. Looking at the power numbers here, let's see, Soto, 31 doubles, along with Xander Bogaerts and David Dahl. Leading the league, Pete Alonso with 30 home runs. He's at the top of the list. Cody Bellinger, 29. Nolan Arenado, Juan Soto with 28. Then you got Nomar Mazar with 27. And Gurriel Jr. with 27 as well up in Toronto. RBIs, Juan Soto has finally caught Yordan Alvarez. That's a joke for those of you who have been listening for quite some time now. If you're new to the program, Yordan Alvarez was so far out in front in the beginning of the simulation. I didn't know if he could ever be caught, but Juan Soto has done it. He's at 88 RBIs, Alvarez at 84. Next, you have Francisco Lindor at 74. So an impressive year offensively from Juan Soto, hitting .343 with 28 home runs and 88 RBIs. He would potentially be in Triple Crown conversation if he could get hot down the stretch. When it comes to stolen bases, it is Malik Smith and everybody else, basically. Malik has 45. Next up, you got Jonathan Villar and Alberto Mondesi with 26. So 20 behind Smith out there in Seattle. I don't know if they're going to be able to catch him being that far behind. So looking at Strat-O-Matic, we had 384 for Brantley. Akiyama in Cincinnati is leading the league here, hitting 356. He's followed by Soler at 341, Charlie Blackmon at 341, Herrera at 339, and Simmons at 337, leading the league here in Strat-O-Matic offensively. So nobody anywhere close to that 384 that we were talking about potentially being historic on the Baseball Reference side of things. So Trevor Story leading the league in doubles. Let's see. Soler leading the league in home runs with 33. Pete Alonso was the league leader with 30 on the other side, but Soler and Story both above him. Story with 32. Torres with 27, Trout with 26, Reyes with 25 at the top of the list when it comes to power offensively. RBIs, Soler with 96. Wow, that would be a ton. We just talked about Soto with 88 having a bunch. 96 for Soler. 33 home runs, 96 RBIs in Kansas City. Whew, carrying them offensively. But continuing down here, let's see if we can find stolen bases. Yelich with 27. I don't know if they don't think Malik Smith is going to play when it comes to Strat-O-Matic because he's not even on the list here, and he had 45 for Baseball Reference. So kind of fascinating to see there. One league, total domination, almost historic-like rates. And then on the other side, not even on the list here. So transitioning lastly to the pitchers, going on the bump, looking at some individuals where we stand. WAR for pitchers when it comes to Baseball Reference. Max Scherzer, 4.8. Jack Flaherty, 4.2. Clayton Kershaw, 4.1. And Garrett Cole, 4.0. Those are the only guys over 4. The top 4 of them there. And those of you trying to figure out what's going on, 5+ is an all-star quality starter. And these numbers accrue over the course of the year. So it's not a fluctuation. It is a stack on top of on top. So that 4.8 for Scherzer will continue to increase, which means he's well on his way to another all-star-like year. ERA, Clayton Kershaw leading the league at 2.15, followed by Walker Buehler, 2.16. So both Dodgers 1-2 in the league. Low 2 ERA. That would not be fun for the rest of the league. This one has David Price as a 2.68. Obviously, we talked about David sitting out. But Fried down in Atlanta, 2.54. And Ranger Suarez in Philadelphia, 2.55. The left-hander who could potentially be used in the rotation. We'll have to wait and see. But German Marquez, 13 wins, leading the league. Shane Bieber, Steven Strasburg behind him with 12. Let's look at saves here. Going to the bullpen, Giovanni Gallegos with 25 in St. Louis. Kenley Jansen, 24 out in L.A. Will Smith, 23 in Atlanta. And then Chapman and Diaz with 22 for New York and Colorado. Looking at the strikeout list here, Max Scherzer leads the way, 193. Lucas Giolito behind him with 164, and Garrett Cole with 161. But Scherzer certainly asserting his dominance in the strikeout performance. But Johnny Cueto with 3 shutouts so far, Madison Bumgarner with 3 shutouts, and Zach Greinke with 4 complete games leading the way on the bump for Baseball Reference. And wrapping things up here, Stratomatic talking pitching, Clayton Kershaw, 2.14 ERA, so both computer simulations have him almost identical ERAs here through July 5th. Kind of fascinating to see. Almost 2+ months into the season. We got Blake Snell, 2.40. Martinez, 2.60 for St. Louis. Scherzer, 2.62. And Manaea, 2.68 there, leading the league when it comes to ERA. Complete games, really only one here is the top for Stratomatic. We had 4 complete games, I just said in Baseball Reference, and 1. And that's more realistic, honestly. That 4 is high now that I'm saying it out loud. Nobody's finished games anymore. So I don't think we're going to see more than 1 or 2 when it comes to this summer, at least in 60 games. So on the save side of things, Hader in Milwaukee getting some love here from Stratomatic, leading the league with 28. He's tied with Yates out in San Diego. Hendricks, let's see, out in Oakland with 27. Mark Melanson, 26, Diaz, 26, Hand, 25. They're at the top of the list there. Everybody's got a shutout. Only 1 leads the league, so nobody's standing out there. And then strikeouts, Garrett Cole and DeGrom are tied at 164, trailed closely by Blake Snell and Max Scherzer in the strikeout department. So a lot of common names when it comes to the individual performances and who's going to be at the top of the list. A lot of guys that we've seen there in the past still performing at the top of their game according to these supercomputers and simulations. But that wraps it up, guys, for today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's episode. I'll ask you one more time before we head out of here to please head to social media. Check out the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Check out the GSMC Podcast Network. Please leave a 5-star rating, write a review. It only takes a couple of seconds. All you got to do is scroll up, hit the star all the way on the right, hit the purple write a review button, and tell me what you liked about the show, and I'll read it and get you some airtime here as well. But that wraps it up. Like I said, another day in the books, Monday, July 6th. Hopefully everybody out there has a lovely week. Major League Baseball is actually releasing its schedule today. That's why we're not talking about it on today's episode. We're going to get into all of that, plus much more on Thursday's episode. So you're going to want to click that subscribe button. That way you guys are notified the moment this podcast is released every Monday and Thursday, so you can get all the baseball information your heart desires. But once again, I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I appreciate everything you guys do out there. Share, like, subscribe the episode, but most importantly, enjoy your night, everybody. We'll talk to you again on Thursday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.